Today we're going to be talking about this phone right here. This is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and if you're curious about the case, it's just a Spigen case I picked up. I'll leave a link down below. I think it's called the Rugged Armor or something like that. They're not sponsoring this video by any means. I just think it looks like a pretty damn nice case, and it has a kickstand in here as well, so you can prop it up if you're watching videos. But no, I've been using this phone for the past month now, and there's definitely a lot of things I like about it. There's some little quirky things that annoy me, but overall, I would say it's a solid device. Now, obviously, there has been a price bump from last year. Apple have actually put the prices up outside the US, even though they sneakily didn't tell you that at the keynote. And so this phone actually cost me £1,300, which works out to be about $1,400, which is really damn expensive for a phone. But honestly, if you're coming from an older device or you're coming from some form of Android phone and you're thinking of sticking with an iPhone for the foreseeable future, this phone is super future-proof compared to every other phone on the market. This is going to last you a long time. Apple is well known for making their phones very durable and providing them with security updates and software updates for up to about 7 years. And something else I really like about Apple products is they tend to hold their value. So every Android phone I ever buy, it tends to lose about $200 or $300 within a few months of owning it. But this phone right here, if you sell this 12 months later, you're going to get almost, I would say, about 80% of what you actually paid for it back, which is pretty good. So if you're thinking of upgrading or even keeping this, it's definitely a good investment. You're not going to go wrong by buying an iPhone. The only phone I would suggest not buying is the iPhone 14, because that phone is trash. Straight up, it's terrible. It's the same phone as last year. I love Apple, but these things, these minor things they do, really bother me. So anyway, the main changes you're going to notice are the display, the new camera module on the back, the new chipset, and possibly the new gyroscope and accelerometer inside of this phone. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but now there's a car crash detection mode. So you may have seen it from the keynote, you may have seen it online around and about, but now if you're in an accident, this phone will actually call emergency services. And this is honestly amazing. I hope more companies implement this because this could be life-changing. If you're in a car accident alone and there's no one to call for help, this could really save your life. So I honestly really do like this feature, but there has been some incidents I've read online where there's been false triggers. So for example, people on roller coaster rides have accidentally called emergency services. And I can imagine that actually being quite easy in terms of fooling this phone, because you're obviously going pretty fast, you're going around bends, you're going down like drops and up really steep slopes, and then you're braking abruptly. So honestly, yeah, I'm not surprised this phone thinks you're in a car crash, because it kind of does seem that way. But in terms of the hardware, I am just loving this phone. It's a little bit darker than the other years. This is the space black color. It's stainless steel, and you've got this matte finish glass on the back, which is really nice, doesn't fingerprint too much. But these rails on the side, boy, they get very fingerprinty. I just love this like boxy design of the iPhone. I wish more phones would make a boxy sort of style design. The new Pixel, which just came out, is very rounded, and it's got all these curves and curved edges. And yes, feels nice in the hand, it's very ergonomic, but there's something about it that just doesn't feel as premium or as nice as just flat edges. So this device obviously comes in a couple of sizes, the Pro model, which is 6.1 inches, or the Pro Max, which is 6.7. I had this really big debate about whether to get the standard Pro because this phone's just very huge and it's very awkward to hold in the hand. Now I do like it being big because it's great for watching content, it's great for just watching movies or just any sort of interactive things if you're playing games. It's amazing to have a big screen, and also you're getting better battery life, but honestly just the standard Pro fits so well in the hand, it's such a nice size, but I ended up going for the Pro Max anyway, just for that bigger screen. Now those bezels have just been made the slightest bit thinner, you're probably not even going to notice, but just a tad bit thinner, so you're getting a little bit more edge to edge in terms of the screen. But something you really will notice this year is obviously that massive dynamic island, which is at the top of your screen, and also how bright this phone gets. So it does reach 2000 nits of brightness. So when you're outside, when you're in direct sunlight or bright conditions, this phone is so damn easy to see. It's definitely the brightest smartphone on the market right now. But compared to last year, it's only a slight bump up. There's a slight resolution increase, but really nothing much that you're gonna notice. So let's talk about the dynamic island. So I know a lot of people are probably gonna think it's a bit of a gimmick, But honestly, this thing actually changes the way you use your device. There's quite a lot of features packed into here, not just standalone iOS features, but third-party features. Anything using the Now Playing API will automatically work with the dynamic island. So if you're using Spotify or Amazon Music or really any multimedia app, it's going to automatically go into that dynamic island. So basically how it works is when you go and play music or you start a timer or you're doing something like on a phone call, once you exit out that app and you go back to your home screen or you're in a different app, it's going to go ahead and actually put that task in the dynamic island. So it's kind of like a way of multitasking. And so whatever you're doing, if you want to quickly go ahead and check which song you're playing, you just go ahead and hold down on the dynamic island. It pops up with this sort of bigger enlarged pill-shaped widget. And then in there, you can play, pause your music, you can skip track, you can even scrub through to a specific part of a podcast or song you're listening to. And it doesn't just work for music apps or for simple apps on your phone like the timer. It works for if you're on a phone call or if you're making screen recordings. Even if you mute your device or unmute it, it's going to pop up and it's going to expand in the dynamic island. And when you're using this dynamic island on the 120 Hz screen, it really does feel very fluid and alive and part of iOS and part of the phone. So it really doesn't feel like a cutout when you're using it. It really does feel useful and not so much in the way. Now, obviously, when you're watching videos, it is going to be there. It's going to be very large at the side of your screen, and that is kind of annoying. I wish when you're watching videos, it maybe would just remove the dynamic island and show the hole punches. I don't really know. It just feels kind of too much. It kind of juts in actually a little bit further than the notch did from last year. So you're going to actually get a little bit less content on your screen. But overall, I would say it's definitely a nice feature. Not only can it have one task in the dynamic island, you can actually have multiple things. So if you're maybe listening to some music and you also have a timer, it will both go up into the dynamic island. So it will actually split off and you'll have this kind of pill with a dot at the side. So now let's talk about the camera. The camera is my favorite bit because this year's camera is a massive step up from the past few years. So pretty much every iPhone, as far as I can remember, had a 12 megapixel camera. And now this year, they've actually bumped it up to 48 megapixel. So definitely a big improvement in terms of your ability to reframe or crop into your images. And now when you're actually using the 2x zoom option, it's going to be a lot better because you're still getting a 12 megapixel frame. Whereas last year when you cropped in, you were getting like a 4 megapixel frame because you're cropping into that 12 megapixel sensor. But this year, you're actually getting a still pretty usable image. So I've actually found myself shooting a lot with this 2x zoom. But straight up, if you're shooting in the standard picture mode, if you're just taking your phone out of the box, taking a picture, it's definitely a good camera, but it gets a lot better when you use the ProRAW feature. So I would highly recommend you dive into the settings, you explore a little bit with ProRAW, and you take it out and about, do some proper photography, and go ahead and edit those pictures, and you will get amazing results. It doesn't perform as well in terms of the zoom. It's only got 3x telephoto. The zoom is definitely not as good as any of the Android competitors, but that main sensor of 48 megapixels blows anything else out of the water. I've compared this to the new Pixel 7 Pro, and it doesn't even come close. Now, I know a lot of people on Twitter are debating this. They're saying it's better on the Pixel 7 or whatever. But from my experience, it's definitely not. And I can tell you as a photographer, it's better on the iPhone. I will show you two images on the screen here. One of them will be the iPhone, one of them will be the Pixel. Just watch what happens when we zoom into the iPhone photo. The quality retained from digitally zooming is unbelievable on the iPhone. So much more detail is in this image here. And this is what we want as a photographer. We want more detail because this gives us the ability to reframe our image or crop in. And when we edit in Lightroom, we don't really care about the colors or any of the default out of camera settings. We just want a raw image to edit. Now, I know a lot of people are not going to be photographers. A lot of people just want to pull their phone out and they want to snap a photo. And I can say the Pixel looks better at face value when you're comparing them. The Pixel looks better, but the iPhone gives you more flexibility in terms of the detail retained and if you're going to go ahead and edit. Now, the Pixel definitely performs a lot better in terms of low light as well. So the iPhone has pretty bad low light, I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit over sharpened and it's just not as good. as any of the other competitors. Samsung is better low light, the Pixel is better low light, and I think that's purely because of the processing. This has a better sensor than a lot of other phones out there, and Apple just need to work on their low light performance, their processing a little bit more. And also a really nice feature would be if they brought astrophotography mode, because that's one of my favorite features of the Pixel. Look at some of these shots that I took on the Pixel of the night sky. They are pretty unbelievable that they are taken from a smartphone, and I really wish they would bring that feature to the iPhone. But that's just a small gripe of mine. In terms of video, the iPhone has always been the king of video. I've compared this to the new Pixel 7 Pro, I've compared it to the Samsung S22 Ultra, and honestly, again, I would say if you're shooting raw video, this gives you ProRAW. You're gonna have so much flexibility if you wanna color grade your footage, if you wanna import it into Final Cut or Premiere Pro and edit this for some sort of movie or for YouTube, you're gonna be better off getting the iPhone. The cinematic mode is also a lot better because you've got the depth sensor on the iPhone. I actually did some shots recently on the Pixel 7 Pro and it was just crazy off. The blur effect was just moving all over the place. The phone didn't know what to blur and what to keep in focus. And you know why? Because there's no depth sensor. It's just using AI. And maybe it will get better with software updates, but right now the iPhone is still king. And I absolutely love the way some of the shots come out. Look at this shot right here of my friend sitting on a boat. And just look at the way that the focus transitions from his face to the background off the boat. I really, really like this shot, and honestly, the blur isn't perfect. It definitely could be improved, but a lot of the time I'm just gonna be shooting videos just standard. I don't need the cinematic mode. So when you're shooting as a standard video modes, the highest resolution you're gonna get is 4K 60. Now, even though this is a 48 megapixel sensor, I know what you're thinking, Apple didn't bring the ability to shoot 8K. I'm presuming that might be due to the storage limitation or maybe even the A16, but surely it's powerful enough to record 8K. I'm not really sure why. But yeah, cameras are absolutely solid. The front camera's okay. For me, it's a little bit grainy. I kind of wish they would throw in a wide angle front camera similar to on the new iPad. I really think a wide angle front camera would be useful, especially if you're on video calls and you're maybe taking selfies with groups. It's a little bit close for me, and again, it's just kind of grainy. Nothing special, just, it's okay. Okay, this is a front-facing camera test. iPhone 14 Pro Max on the left, Pixel 7 Pro on the right. Both at 4K 60. So in terms of battery life, this is where things get interesting. So out of the box, I was getting maybe about 6 or 7 hours. I would say 7 hours screen on time with the always-on display. Once they updated to iOS 16.1, and then I actually went ahead and turned off the always on display, I was then getting about 10 to 11 hours of screen on time. So yeah, either that always on display was draining a lot of power, or the actual software was just not very optimized because it was the first iOS 16 release and there were still bugs and things weren't polished out. And then if you leave the always on display turned on, you're also gonna get a little bit of battery drain from that because it's a very bright always on display. I really wish it actually had a black background. It was a bit more like on Android where you could go ahead and customize it and you could sort of have various widgets you want on the always on screen and not just the lock screen, but dimmer. Currently, the only way to actually make it a little bit dimmer is if you actually enable a focus mode, there's an option to dim it, but it's just kind of annoying because then you have to turn on the focus mode and you miss out on your notifications every time you just want to have a dim always on screen. So for me, it's not really worth it. I've just disabled it. I've completely turned it off. Some people might like it if you put it in your pocket or when you're sleeping, or if you have an Apple Watch, it is going to turn off when you leave your device, when you walk away from it, or when you put it in your pocket. So yeah, it's not always on, but most of the time it is, and it does have some battery drain. And in terms of the chip upgrade, I would say it's very minor. They didn't even compare it to the A15 on stage. They went ahead and straight up compared it to the A13. So yeah, a little bit more efficient. It's now a 4nm chip or 5nm chip, whatever. The marketing says 4, but it's technically 5. But yeah, it's basically a little bit better than last year's, not a massive jump. But I would say the main upgrade for this phone is probably the dynamic island, and if you don't already have 120 Hz on an iPhone, that would be a reason to upgrade to this. Something interesting I actually thought about, what will happen when they remove the cutouts? Because I was kind of thinking about this, like surely if Apple went to all this effort to make a dynamic island, they're gonna keep it for a long time. Apple never do things for 1 year or 2 years, they normally keep things around for a long, long time. So are we gonna have cutouts for a long time? Or are they maybe just going to keep the dynamic island there even if they put the camera under the screen? It feels like a very Apple thing to do. So overall, my thoughts about this phone: it's an iPhone. In terms of the experience, it's going to be the same as last year. It's going to be the same as the phone before. They all run iOS 16 now. So all those new features, you're going to get them on the iPhone 13. So if you do want to pick up the 13 Pro for a little bit less money, maybe you don't care about the dynamic island or the higher megapixel count in the camera, then yeah, you could definitely get a 13 Pro for cheaper. You could definitely install iOS 16 and get a very similar experience. So I would say if you want to upgrade from an older iPhone, you're willing to pay the money, you just have an extra $1,000 lying around, and you want the best of the best iPhone, then yeah, this is it. This is the best of the best that you can get. And honestly, it's a damn beautiful phone to use. I've had a lot of phones in my hand over the years, and this is probably the nicest feeling one to use. But anyway, guys, that is pretty much it. That's all my thoughts and opinions and all the newest best features of the new iPhone 14 Pro Max. So if you guys want to check out my camera comparison test, I will be doing that on my new channel. So if you guys could subscribe to that new channel and this channel and just hit the bell icon, do all of that YouTube stuff, I would really, really appreciate that, because I put so much effort into these videos and I get so frustrated sitting here for hours editing and filming, and it is a nightmare sometimes, but I really do love it. But yeah, that is pretty much it, guys. I blabbered on so freaking much this video. It's going to be so long, but I will see you guys later. Peace.